Chapter 1. The second time around. The first thing Wei Qing noticed was the chandelier. It hung above the dining table like a frozen waterfall of crystal, each droplet catching the morning light and scattering it into 1,000 tiny rainbows. In his first life, he had thought it was beautiful. In this life, he thought it looked like a migraine waiting to happen. He blinked. Once. Twice. The rainbows didn't disappear. Not again, he thought. Please, not again. But the universe, as always, had no interest in his pleas. The dining table stretched before him like a battlefield. White marble, cold and unforgiving. At the head sat Wei Guoming, his father. No, the patriarch of the Wei group, a man whose love was dispensed like medicine, in measured doses, only when absolutely necessary. To his right, Liang Rui, the stepmother, held her teacup with the careful precision of a woman who had never accidentally broken anything in her life. To his left, Wei Jia, his half-brother, was already sneering into his porridge. And at the far end of the table, standing awkwardly by the doorway, dripping rainwater onto the imported Italian marble, was a young man Wei Cheng had seen once before. Wei Yu, the real son, the rightful heir, the protagonist of the novel that had eaten Wei Cheng's first life like a starving wolf. He looked exactly as the book had described him. Delicate features, wide eyes, a suitcase clutched to his chest like a shield. His clothes were cheap, department store quality, the kind that lasted exactly one season before falling apart. His hair was plastered to his forehead from the rain. He looked, in short, like a kicked puppy who had somehow wandered into a palace. In the original novel, this was the moment when Wei Cheng, the fake young master, the imposter, the placeholder, had lost his mind. He remembered it vividly. The screaming. The vase he had thrown, a Qing dynasty replica, though he hadn't known that at the time. The way his voice had cracked when he shrieked. I am the real son. I belong here. The sedatives. The cold, clinical removal from the mansion. The rental room where he had died 6 months later, alone. The novel's narrator noting his passing in a single sentence. The fake heir was found deceased. No one came to claim the body. 14 words. That was all he had been worth. Not this time. Wei Cheng set down his chopsticks. He wiped his mouth with a cloth napkin, slowly, deliberately, giving himself time to feel the weight of the moment. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a manila folder. The table went quiet. What is that? Wei Guoming asked. His voice was flat, uncurious. He was already calculating how much this interruption would cost him. My resignation, Wei Cheng said. He slid the folder across the marble. It stopped exactly in the center of the table, equidistant from everyone, a neutral zone in a family that had never known neutrality. Liang Rui's eyes flickered. She was good at hiding her emotions, but Wei Cheng had watched her for 18 years in his first life. He knew the micro-expressions, the slight tightening of her jaw, the way her fingers curled around her teacup just a little too tightly. She was waiting for the explosion. They all were. Wei Cheng obliged them by not obliging them at all. Inside you'll find 3 documents, he said, counting on his fingers. 1. A signed renunciation of all inheritance claims to the Wei Group and its subsidiaries. 2. My resignation from any and all positions within the family companies. 3. A request to forward my mail for 6 months, after which you may discard it. Silence. Wei Jia was the first to break it, because Wei Jia had never learned to read a room. You're joking, he said, laughing, a sharp, ugly sound. You're finally losing it, aren't you? Big Brother's gone crazy. Possibly, Wei Cheng agreed, but I'm not wrong. Wei Guoming opened the folder. He read each page slowly, methodically, as if looking for hidden clauses or traps. Old habit. In his world, everyone was trying to cheat him, including, apparently, his own son. This is unexpected, he said finally. I thought you'd be pleased, Wei Cheng said. You've wanted me gone for years. Now you don't even have to pay severance. Liang Rui set down her teacup. The click of porcelain against saucer was loud in the silence. Wei Cheng, she said, her voice dripping with false concern. Are you unwell? Perhaps you should lie down. The shock of all this. She gestured vaguely at Wei Yu, who had not moved from the doorway. I'm perfectly well, Wei Chang said. In fact, I've never been better. He stood up. His legs didn't shake. His hands didn't tremble. In his first life, he had been a bundle of nerves wrapped in expensive clothes. Always performing. Always desperate for approval. Always terrified that someone would discover the truth. That he was adopted, that he wasn't blood, that he had been a placeholder all along. But that Wei Chang had died in a rental room, and this Wei Chang had already grieved. There was nothing left to fear. He picked up his backpack from beside his chair. It was an old thing, canvas, faded, bought from a street vendor 3 years ago. He had packed it last night, after the rebirth had settled into his bones. Laptop, 2 changes of clothes, his rice cooker, wrapped in a towel to protect it. That was it. 18 years in the Wei household, and his entire life fit into one backpack. Wei Yu finally spoke. His voice was soft, tentative, like a child testing whether it was safe to exist. You're leaving? Wei Chang looked at him. Really looked. In the novel, Wei Yu had been written as a gentle soul. Too gentle, perhaps, for the world he was entering. He would be manipulated, used, and eventually rescued by the male lead, Gu Yansheng. He would get his happy ending. But along the way, he would suffer. In Wei Chang's first life, he had hated Wei Yu, blamed him for everything. The jealousy had been a poison, and he had drunk it willingly. This time, he felt only tiredness, and, unexpectedly, a flicker of protectiveness. The room at the end of the east wing, he said, pointing toward the hallway. It has the best morning light. Good for reading. Don't let Liang Rui give you tea. She always puts something in it. Sleep aids? Usually. She likes people drowsy and compliant. Liang Rui's teacup clattered. How dare you? Also, Wei Chang continued, as if she hadn't spoken. Wei Jie will try to humiliate you at every opportunity. Don't react. He feeds on reactions. Starve him. I'm standing right here. Wei Jie snapped. I know, Wei Chang said. That's the problem. He swung his backpack over one shoulder and walked toward the door. Wei Yu stepped aside quickly, making space, his wide eyes following Wei Chang's every movement. At the threshold, Wei Chang paused. He didn't look back. He had learned, in his first life, that looking back only hurt. Don't try to find me, he said. I'm not coming back. And honestly, you shouldn't want me to. He stepped out into the rain. The bus to the outer ring took 47 minutes. Wei Chang counted them. He had nothing else to do. His phone was already disconnected from the family plan, and he hadn't bothered to buy a new SIM card yet. The rain streaked the windows in gray rivulets, blurring the city into watercolors. The city itself was a character in the novel. Jiangcheng, a sprawling metropolis of glass towers and narrow alleyways, of billionaires and beggars, of families that rose and fell on the whims of inheritance and betrayal. In his first life, Wei Chang had never seen the parts of the city that didn't advertise themselves in glossy magazines. He had been ferried from penthouse to penthouse, blindfolded by privilege. Now he was going to live in them. He had chosen the outer ring deliberately. It was cheap. It was anonymous. It was where people went when they wanted to disappear. And Wei Chang, more than anything, wanted to disappear. Not disappear, he corrected himself. Exist quietly. There's a difference. The bus let him off at a stop that smelled of wet concrete and fried oil. He consulted the crumpled printout in his pocket. He had memorized the address, but the ritual of checking gave him something to do with his hands. Lucky Garden Apartments, Building 7, Room 601. It sounded almost cheerful. It was not. The building squatted between a shuttered noodle shop and a convenience store whose fluorescent lights flickered in arrhythmic distress. 7 stories of gray concrete, laundry hanging from every available window like flags of surrender. The front gate was supposed to have a lock. It didn't. Wei Chang climbed the stairs. The elevator, he had been warned, had been broken since 2019. No one had fixed it because no one could agree on who should pay. 6 flights. His calves burned by the 3rd. By the 5th, he was questioning every life choice that had led him here. By the 6th, he was too tired to question anything. The door to 601 was pale blue, paint peeling at the edges. The lock was a cheap brass thing that probably opened with a stern look. Wei Chung inserted the key, turned it, and pushed. The apartment was a shoebox. No, that was unfair to shoeboxes. Shoeboxes had structural integrity. The room was perhaps 12 feet by 12 feet, with a kitchenette in one corner, 2 burners, a sink, a refrigerator that hummed like it was dying, and a bathroom so small that the toilet and shower were essentially the same appliance. The window faced another building, close enough that Wei Chung could see the pattern of the neighbor's wallpaper. The walls were the color of old mayonnaise. The floor was linoleum, cracked in a pattern that resembled a map of an unknown country. Wei Chung loved it. He set down his backpack. He opened the refrigerator. It made a sound like a wounded animal, and noted that it was empty except for a half-eaten jar of pickled vegetables left by the previous tenant. He closed it. He would deal with that later. He walked to the window and looked out. Below, a woman was arguing with a vegetable vendor about the price of bok choy. A child ran past, chased by a dog that was clearly winning. In the distance, the skyline of Jiangsheng glittered like a promise that had never been meant for people like him. This is it, he thought. This is the rest of my life. It wasn't a glamorous thought. It wasn't even a happy one. But it was his. No one had given it to him. No one could take it away. He unpacked his laptop, plugged it in, and began setting up his freelance design accounts. He had a few regular clients from his first life, people who had hired him for logo work and small projects, who had no idea he was away. He would start there. He would build something small, something quiet, something that couldn't be taken from him. At 11 p.m., he made instant noodles in his rice cooker and ate them standing at the window, watching the city blink its 1,000 electric eyes. And that was when he noticed the apartment next door. Room 602 was completely dark. Not dark like someone had turned off the lights. Dark like no one had ever turned them on. The window was covered with what looked like a blackout curtain, heavy fabric, the kind people used to keep out light, and perhaps other things. Wei Chung stared at it for a long moment. Then he shrugged and went back to his noodles. Not my business, he thought. Not my problem. I'm a boring person now. Boring people don't investigate their neighbors. He finished his noodles, washed his bowl in the sad little sink, and went to sleep on a mattress that smelled faintly of cigarette smoke and regret. Tomorrow he would buy sheets. Tomorrow he would begin. But tonight, he lay in the darkness of his new life, listening to the buildings settle around him. And for the first time in 2 lifetimes, he felt something he had never expected to feel again. Peace. Chapter 2. Lucky Garden. The first week was a lesson in forgetting. Wei Chung woke each morning at 7, made kanji in his rice cooker, and sat at his second-hand desk to work. His clients, 3 of them, loyal and uncomplicated, sent him design briefs for logos, brochures, and social media graphics. The work was unglamorous but steady. It paid the rent and left enough for instant noodles, vegetables, and the occasional luxury of eggs. He did not think about the Wei family. He did not think about his first life. He did not think about the novel. He failed mostly. The memories came in fragments. The cold weight of his father's disapproval, the sharp edge of Liang Rui's smile, the moment he had realized, truly realized, that no one in that house had ever loved him. They had tolerated him. They had used him. They had kept him as a placeholder until the real heir appeared, and then they had discarded him like last season's fashion. In his first life, that realization had broken him. He had spent his final months in a spiral of bitterness and self-destruction, lashing out at everyone who tried to help and eventually driving them all away. In this life, he had no intention of repeating that mistake. But forgetting, truly forgetting, was harder than he had anticipated. So he worked. He drew. He let the shapes and colors consume his attention until there was no room left for the past. Design was meditative. The careful balance of negative space, the alchemy of complementary colors, the satisfaction of a perfect curve. It was the one skill he had carried from his first life, and he clung to it like a lifeline. By the 4th day, he had established a routine. By the 5th, he had noticed the boots. They appeared every morning, always in the same spot, outside the door of 602, just to the left of the mat. Black leather, worn but well-maintained, with scuff marks on the toes that suggested their owner walked a lot, or kicked things they shouldn't. Sometimes the scuff marks were darker than they should be. Rust-colored. Wei Chung told himself it was rust. He told himself this every morning for 3 days. On the 4th morning, he stopped lying. The first time he saw his neighbor was an accident. It was 2 a.m. Wei Chung had been working late on a rush job. Some tech startup needed a logo by morning, which meant they had probably forgotten about it until 5 minutes ago. He was standing at the window, stretching his back, when movement caught his eye. The door to 602 opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, Wei Cheng's height or taller, though it was hard to tell from this angle. Broad shoulders, narrow waist, the kind of build that came from physical work or violence. He wore a black coat that swallowed his silhouette, the collar turned up against the night air. His face was half in shadow, but Wei Cheng caught a glimpse of sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, and eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. There was something about the way he moved, silent, deliberate, like a predator who had learned that noise was a luxury he couldn't afford. The man glanced toward Wei Cheng's window. For a moment, their eyes met through the glass. Then the man looked away, adjusted his collar, and walked down the stairs. His footsteps made no sound on the concrete. Wei Cheng stood frozen at the window for a full minute after he disappeared. Well, he thought finally. That's not ominous at all. He went back to his logo. He did not sleep well. The second time he saw his neighbor was less dramatic. It was the next morning, 8 a.m. Wei Cheng was taking out his trash, a bag of noodle containers and coffee grounds, when he nearly collided with the man from 602, who was standing in the hallway staring at his own door as if it had personally offended him. Up close, the man was even more intimidating. He was at least 6 feet, with a face that looked like it had been carved from granite and then left in the rain. His hair was black, slightly too long, falling across his forehead in a way that might have been artistic if he hadn't clearly just rolled out of bed. He was wearing a gray t-shirt and sweatpants. Cheap, ordinary, but there was nothing ordinary about the way he held himself. Like a coiled spring, like a man who had forgotten how to relax. Wei Cheng's first instinct was to apologize and retreat into his apartment. His second instinct, the one that had survived 2 lifetimes and refused to be cowed, was to stand his ground. "Morning," he said. The man turned. His eyes were dark, unreadable, and entirely focused on Wei Cheng's face. It was the kind of stare that made people confess to things they hadn't done. "Morning," the man said. His voice was low, rough, as if he didn't use it often. There was a pause. "I'm your neighbor," Wei Cheng said, gesturing at his door. 601, just moved in. The man looked at Wei Cheng's door. He looked at Wei Cheng. He looked at the trash bag in Wei Cheng's hand. "I know," he said. Another pause. Wei Cheng had never been good with silences. In his first life, he had filled them with nervous chatter, desperate to be liked. Now he simply waited, watching the man's face for any clue to his thoughts. None came. "Well," Wei Cheng said finally, "I'll let you get back to whatever you were doing." He gestured vaguely at the man's door. Staring contest? The man blinked. It was the first expression he had shown. "The lock is broken," he said. Wei Cheng looked at the door. The handle was slightly askew. The wood around it splintered as if someone had tried to force it open. "Someone broke in?" "No." The man's voice was flat. "I locked myself out. The maintenance man won't come until tomorrow." Wei Cheng considered this. He considered the cost of a locksmith. He considered the fact that this man, who looked like he could bench press a refrigerator, was standing helplessly in the hallway because of a broken lock. "Want to borrow my phone?" he offered. The man stared at him. It was the same stare as before, but this time there was something else underneath it. Curiosity, maybe, or confusion. "Why?" he asked. Wei Cheng shrugged. "Because you're my neighbor. And if you die of exposure in the hallway, the rent split gets complicated." The man's mouth twitched. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close. "No," he said. "I have a phone." "Then why are you standing here?" "I'm thinking." Wei Cheng waited. The man didn't elaborate. "Okay," Wei Cheng said finally. "Well, if you want to wait in my apartment, the door's open. I have instant noodles." He walked past the man and down the stairs to dispose of his trash. When he came back, the man was gone. But the door to 602 was open, the broken lock dangling uselessly from the frame. Wei Cheng shook his head. and went back to work. On the sixth day, Wei Cheng's washing machine tried to kill him. It was an old machine, the kind with a mechanical timer that clicked like a bomb. He had loaded it with his meager wardrobe, 2 pairs of jeans, 3 t-shirts, a week's worth of underwear, and started the cycle. 10 minutes later, water began seeping from beneath the machine, spreading across the linoleum in a slow, determined flood. Wei Cheng grabbed a towel, then another, then a third. The water kept coming. He was on his hands and knees, cursing softly in 3 languages, when a shadow fell over him. The neighbor was standing in his doorway. Wei Cheng hadn't heard him approach. He hadn't heard the door open, either, which was concerning, because he was fairly sure he had locked it. "Your door was open," the man said, as if reading his thoughts. "It was locked." It wasn't. Wei Cheng decided not to argue. "The washing machine is flooding. I see that. Are you just going to stand there, or are you going to help?" The man tilted his head, considering. Then, without a word, he walked past Wei Cheng and knelt beside the machine. He examined it for exactly 7 seconds. Wei Cheng counted, then reached behind it and twisted something. The water stopped. "How did you do that?" Wei Cheng asked. "The hose was loose." The man stood up, wiping his hands on his sweatpants. "You need a new washer for the connection. It's leaking." "I don't have a new washer. I have instant noodles and a dream." The man's mouth twitched again. "I have one." Before Wei Cheng could respond, he was gone, back into the hallway, into his apartment, and then back again, holding a small metal ring. He installed it in 30 seconds, tested the machine, and nodded. "It's fixed," he said. Wei Cheng stared at the machine, then at the man, then at the machine again. "Thank you," he said. The man nodded once and walked out. Wei Cheng stood in his wet kitchen, surrounded by soaked towels, and tried to process what had just happened. His neighbor, the terrifying, silent, possibly criminal neighbor, had just fixed his washing machine and left without saying another word. What the hell, Wei Cheng thought, is wrong with this building? That night, Wei Cheng lay in bed and listened to the sounds of Lucky Garden, the distant argument from the apartment below, a married couple who seemed to communicate exclusively through shouting, the hum of the dying refrigerator, the creak of the building settling into its foundations. And from 602, nothing. No footsteps, no music, no television, no signs of life at all. It was as if the man next door didn't exist except when he chose to appear. A ghost who had taken up residence in a concrete building, who fixed washing machines and stared at locked doors and otherwise vanished into the fabric of the night. Wei Cheng fell asleep wondering what kind of person lived in complete silence. He dreamed of his first life, the mansion, the chandelier, the cold marble floor. But this time, when he looked in the mirror, he saw the face of the man from 602 staring back. He woke up at 4 a.m. and didn't go back to sleep. Chapter 3. The Dumpling Exchange. The dumplings were an accident, or rather, they were a consequence of Wei Cheng's inability to measure ingredients. He had bought cabbage and pork with the intention of making enough dumplings for 3 meals. But his hands, trained by years of cooking for himself in his first life, had moved on autopilot. By the time he realized he had made 48 dumplings, it was already too late. 48 dumplings. He had a rice cooker, a small refrigerator, and approximately 2 square feet of counter space. There was no way he could store them all. He could freeze some, he supposed. But the freezer compartment was the size of a paperback novel, and it was already occupied by a bag of frozen peas he kept for emergencies. So, 48 dumplings. One man, 36 hours before they went bad. Wei Cheng looked at the steaming pile of dumplings. He looked at his sad little kitchen. He looked at the wall that separated him from 602. No, he thought. Absolutely not. You're a boring person now. Boring people do not bring dumplings to mysterious, possibly dangerous neighbors. He ate 8 dumplings. He put 6 in the freezer. He still had 34 left. Wei Cheng sighed, arranged the remaining dumplings on a plate, and walked to the door of 602. He knocked 3 times. No answer. He knocked again. Nothing. He was about to turn around. See? You tried. It's fine. You can just throw them away, when the door opened a crack. The man from 602 looked out. His hair was messier than before, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. There was a bruise on his jaw that hadn't been there yesterday, purple and yellow and vaguely fist-shaped. Wei Qing didn't comment on the bruise. He had learned, in his first life, not to ask questions that people didn't want to answer. "I made too many dumplings," he said, holding up the plate. "You want some?" The man stared at the dumplings, then at Wei Qing, then at the dumplings again. "I don't need charity," he said. "It's not charity. It's math." Wei Qing counted on his fingers. "I have 48 dumplings. I can eat maybe 12 before they go bad. I can freeze 6. That leaves 30. I'm offering you 10. You be doing me a favor." The man's eyes narrowed. "That's not how math works. Look, do you want dumplings or not?" The man was silent for a long moment. Then he opened the door wider. Wei Qing stepped inside. The apartment was bare. Not minimalist, bare. There was a mattress on the floor in one corner, covered with a single gray blanket. A folding chair sat by the window, facing the street. A suitcase lay open near the door, its contents spilling out. Black clothes, a phone charger, a passport. And on the floor beside the mattress, incongruous and almost comical, sat a rice cooker. Not just any rice cooker. This was a Zojirushi, the kind that cost as much as a month's rent in this building. It was the top of the line, with fuzzy logic technology and a voice that announced each setting in polite Japanese. Wei Qing stared at it. The man followed his gaze. "It was a gift," he said. "Someone gave you a $1,000 rice cooker as a gift." "Yes." "Ooh." The man didn't answer. He took the plate of dumplings from Wei Qing's hands and sat down on the folding chair. Wei Qing hesitated, then sat on the floor. The linoleum was cold through his sweatpants, but it was cleaner than he had expected. In fact, the whole apartment was clean, spotless even. No dust, no clutter, just empty space and silence, and the faint smell of something metallic. Blood, Wei Qing's mind supplied, but he pushed the thought away. The man ate a dumpling. He chewed slowly, methodically, as if he had forgotten how to enjoy food and was trying to remember. His eyes widened slightly, just a fraction, and then his expression smoothed back into neutrality. But Wei Qing had seen it. The flicker of surprise. The hint of something almost like pleasure. "The ginger is good," the man said. "I put extra. I like ginger." A pause. "Where did you learn to cook?" the man asked. Wei Qing considered the question. In his first life, he had taught himself to cook in that final rental room, after the Wei family had cut him off and he could no longer afford restaurants. He had been terrible at first: burned rice, oversalted soup, dumplings that fell apart in the water. But he had kept trying because cooking was the only thing that made him feel human. "A previous life," he said. The man looked at him. For a moment, something passed between them, a recognition, maybe. Two people who had both seen things they shouldn't have seen, done things they shouldn't have done. "I'm Shun Jiangwo," the man said. Wei Qing blinked. It was the first time the man had offered his name. Wei Qing. Shun Jiangwo nodded and ate another dumpling. They sat in silence while he finished the plate. Wei Qing didn't rush him. He had learned, in 2 lifetimes, that silence wasn't always uncomfortable. Sometimes it was just silence. When the last dumpling was gone, Shun Jiangwo set the plate down. "Thank you," he said. "You're welcome." Wei Qing stood up, took the plate, and walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the handle. "If you ever need anything," he said, not looking back, "I'm next door. I'm usually up late." He left before Shun Jiangwo could respond. The next morning, Wei Qing found his rice cooker on his doorstep. It was his old rice cooker, the cheap one, the one that had been making strange, clicking noises for weeks. He had been meaning to replace it, but he hadn't gotten around to it. Now it sat in the hallway, clean and polished, with a small note taped to the lid. The note said, "I fixed it." The problem was the heating element. No signature, no return address. But Wei Qing knew who had left it. He laughed, a surprised, genuine laugh that echoed in the empty hallway. Then he picked up the rice cooker, took it inside, and made congee for breakfast. It worked perfectly. Chapter 4. The Clingy Development. The next 2 weeks were confusing. Shun Jiangwo, Wei Qing learned, had a talent for appearing exactly when he was needed and disappearing exactly when he wasn't. He never knocked. He never called. He simply materialized in doorways, hallways, and once, memorably, on the rooftop where Wei Cheng went to sketch. "How did you know I was here?" Wei Cheng asked, looking up from his drawing pad. Shun Jiangwo was standing by the edge of the roof, looking at the city below. He was wearing the same black coat as before, but underneath it was a sweater that Wei Cheng recognized as expensive. Cashmere, probably, the kind that cost more than Wei Cheng's monthly budget. "I heard you walking up the stairs," Shun Jiangwo said. "That's 6 floors. I have good hearing." Wei Cheng decided not to pursue this. "Do you want to sit down? You're making me nervous, looming like that." Shun Jiangwo considered this. Then he sat, not next to Wei Cheng, but a careful distance away. Close enough to talk, far enough to retreat. They sat in silence for a while. Wei Cheng sketched. Shun Jiangwo watched the sky darken, the city lights flicker on one by one. "You draw," Shun Jiangwo said eventually. "It wasn't a question. I'm a graphic designer. Drawing is part of the job. Can I see?" Wei Cheng hesitated. He was private about his work. Not because he was ashamed, but because showing someone your art felt like showing them a piece of your soul. But Shun Jiangwo's voice was quiet, almost tentative, and there was something in his expression that Wei Cheng couldn't quite name. He turned the sketchbook around. The drawing was of the city skyline, but not the one from the rooftop. It was the Jiangcheng of his memory, the glittering towers, the neon lights, the river that cut through the city like a silver scar. But he had drawn it in grayscale, the colors drained away, leaving only shadows and light. Shun Jiangwo studied the drawing for a long time. "It's sad," he said finally. Wei Cheng's heart clenched. "It's not meant to be, but it is." Shun Jiangwo looked up. "You see the city differently than other people. You see what it's missing." Wei Cheng didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. They stayed on the rooftop until the stars came out. When Wei Cheng finally stood to leave, Shun Jiangwo stood too. "I'll walk you down," he said. "It's 6 floors. I think I can manage. I'll walk you down." Wei Cheng sighed. "Fine." They walked in silence. At Wei Cheng's door, Shun Jiangwo paused. "Tomorrow," he said, "the dumplings. Will you make them again?" Wei Cheng blinked. "You want more dumplings?" "Yes." "Why?" Shun Jiangwo's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes softened. "Because they were good. And because—" He stopped, started again. "Because no one has ever given me food without wanting something in return." Wei Cheng thought about this. He thought about his first life, about all the people who had offered him things, clothes, money, affection, and then taken them back with interest. He thought about the emptiness of 602, the bare walls, the single suitcase. "Tomorrow," he said, 7 o'clock. "Bring appetite." Shun Jiangwo nodded once and disappeared into his apartment. Wei Cheng leaned against his door and laughed quietly to himself. What had I gotten into? The dumplings became a ritual. Every few days, Wei Cheng would make a batch, and every time, Shun Jiangwo would appear at his door. Not exactly at 7, but close enough, and eat in silence while Wei Cheng worked or read or pretended not to watch him. Wei Cheng learned things about his neighbor. He learned that Shun Jiangwo preferred his dumplings with vinegar, not soy sauce. That he ate slowly, as if savoring each bite, but his eyes never stopped moving, scanning the room, the windows, the door. That he had a habit of touching his jaw when he was thinking, running his fingers over the bruise that faded and then reappeared in new configurations. He learned that Shun Jiangwo was not a morning person. That he drank his tea black, no sugar, no milk. That he had never used a rice cooker before moving into this building, which explained why he had bought the most expensive one on the market. He had no frame of reference for what was normal. He learned that Shun Jiangwo was, despite everything, trying very hard to be normal. "What do you do?" Wei Cheng asked one evening, while Shun Jiangwo was washing his bowl in the sad little sink. He had started helping with dishes 2 weeks ago, without being asked. "I'm in logistics," Shun Jiangwo said. "Logistics? Yes. That's vague. It's meant to be." Wei Cheng snorted. "Are you a spy? A hitman? An international art thief?" Shun Jiangwo turned off the water. He dried his hands on a towel, the one with the duck pattern that Wei Cheng had bought for 3 yuan at the market. "I'm on vacation," he said. "From logistics?" "From everything." Wei Cheng studied his face. There was something there beneath the neutral expression a weariness that went deeper than exhaustion. The weariness of someone who had been running for a long time and had only just stopped. "Where did you come from?" Wei Cheng asked. "Before here." Shun Jiangwo was quiet for a moment. Then, Jiangbei. Wei Cheng's blood ran cold. Jiangbei, the northern district of Jiangsheng, the part of the city that didn't appear in tourism brochures. Jiangbei was where the gangs operated, where the police went only in groups, where violence was a currency and blood was the change. In his first life, Wei Cheng had heard stories about Jiangbei, about a man called the Ghost, who had risen from nothing to control the entire district, who was feared by rivals and worshipped by subordinates, who had disappeared 6 months ago without a trace. The ghost of Jiangbei. No, Wei Cheng thought. It can't be. But even as he thought it, he knew. The silence. The bruise. The way Shun Jiangwo checked the exits of every room he entered. The $1,000 rice cooker that had been a gift. "You're him," Wei Cheng said. Shun Jiangwo didn't deny it. "Does it matter?" Wei Cheng opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I made you dumplings," he said finally. "Yes. I fixed your washing machine." "You fixed my washing machine?" "You fixed my washing machine." "I just—" Wei Cheng ran a hand through his hair. "I've been feeding a Mafia boss. For 2 weeks. I've been feeding a Mafia boss, and he's been doing my dishes." Shun Jiangwo's mouth twitched. "I also fixed your water heater." "Oh my God." The pressure was uneven. It was bothering me. Wei Cheng sat down heavily on his bed. He stared at Shun Jiangwo. The sharp cheekbones, the dark eyes, the hands that had killed people, probably, and had also washed Wei Cheng's duck-pattern dish towel. "You're not going to kill me, are you?" Wei Cheng asked. Shun Jiangwo looked almost offended. "No, because I know who you are now. That's usually a problem." "I'm on vacation," Shun Jiangwo said again, as if this explained everything. "I don't kill people on vacation. It's against the rules." "What rules?" "My rules." Wei Cheng stared at him for a long moment. Then he started to laugh. Not the quiet laugh of before, but a full, helpless laugh that came from somewhere deep in his chest. "You're insane," he said. "You're a Mafia boss on vacation in a slum building, and you have rules about not killing people, and you eat my dumplings and wash my dishes." "I also water your plants," Shun Jiangwo added. "You water my plants?" "The cactus on the windowsill." It was drooping. Wei Cheng buried his face in his hands. "I can't believe this. I can't believe any of this." Shun Jiangwo stood in the kitchenette, watching him with an expression that might have been concern or amusement. It was hard to tell. "Do you want me to leave?" he asked. Wei Cheng looked up. The question was simple, but the weight behind it was not. Shun Jiangwo wasn't asking about the apartment. He was asking about everything, about the secret, about the danger, about the impossibility of being neighbors with a man like him. "No," Wei Cheng said, and meant it. "But you're bringing your own vinegar next time." "I'm running out." Shun Jiangwo nodded. "I'll buy some tomorrow." He left. The door clicked shut behind him. Wei Cheng lay back on his bed and stared at the ceiling. "This," he thought, "is not the quiet life I wanted." But for some reason, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. Chapter 5. The bodyguard arrive. The first sign that something had changed was the car. It was a black Mercedes, immaculate and out of place among the bicycles and beaten-down sedans that usually lined the street outside Lucky Garden. It had tinted windows, rims that cost more than Wei Cheng's monthly rent, and an air of quiet menace that made the vegetable vendor move her cart 3 meters to the left. Wei Cheng noticed it on a Thursday morning, on his way back from buying eggs. He noticed the 2 men standing beside it on Friday. One was huge, tall and broad, with shoulders that looked like they could hold up a building. He had a face that might have been kind if not for the scar cutting through his left eyebrow, and he was wearing a suit that strained at the seams. The other was smaller, wiry, with sharp features and restless hands. He chain-smoked, lighting one cigarette from the end of another, and his eyes never stopped moving, scanning the street, the windows, the rooftops. They were not subtle. Wei Cheng watched them from his window for a full 5 minutes, eating congee and trying to decide whether to call the police. But the police in this neighborhood didn't respond to suspicious men in expensive suits, and besides, he had a feeling he knew who they were here for. He was proven right when Shun Jiangwo appeared in the hallway, barefoot and scowling, and said, "Ignore them." The two men in the Mercedes? Wei Cheng asked innocently. The two idiots in the Mercedes. They're here for you? Shun Jiangwo's jaw tightened. They're my colleagues. Your colleagues drive a $100,000 car and stand outside buildings looking like they're about to commit a crime? They're not good at being subtle. Wei Cheng leaned against his doorframe. So what are they doing here? Shun Jiangwo was silent for a moment. Then they're worried. About you? About the organization. I'm not available right now. You're on vacation. Yes. Wei Cheng considered this. Do they know you've been fixing my water heater? Shun Jiangwo's expression flickered. No. Do they know you've been eating my dumplings? That's none of their business. Wei Cheng smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. Do you want me to invite them up? They look like they haven't eaten. Shun Jiangwo stared at him. You want to feed my colleagues? I have extra dumplings. And it's cold outside. You don't even know them. They're important to you. That's enough. Something shifted in Shun Jiangwo's eyes. A crack in the mask. A glimpse of something softer underneath. He looked away first. Fine, he said. But if they're annoying, you can throw them out. I'll get the dumplings ready. The two men introduced themselves as Zhang Wei and Li Chun. Zhang Wei was the large one. He had a booming laugh and hands the size of dinner plates. And he introduced himself by saying, "So you're the dumpling guy," in a tone of profound respect. Li Chun was the smoker. He had sharp, clever eyes and a mouth that seemed permanently set in a skeptical line. He shook Wei Cheng's hand briefly and said, "You're smaller than I expected." Wei Cheng, who was of average height and build, decided to take this as a compliment. They sat in Wei Cheng's apartment, all four of them, which was a tight fit, and ate dumplings while Shun Jiangwo glowered from the folding chair. So, Zhang Wei said, reaching for his fourth dumpling, "The boss tells us you're a graphic designer. He tells you about me? He doesn't shut up about you." Li Chun lit another cigarette, then seemed to remember he was indoors and put it out. "It's Wei Cheng this and Wei Cheng that. And did you know Wei Cheng made dumplings with extra ginger?" Shun Jiangwo's scowl deepened. "I don't talk that much. You sent us 17 texts about the washing machine." The washing machine was important. Wei Cheng watched this exchange with fascination. These two men, one huge, one wiry, both clearly dangerous, treated Shun Jiangwo like a cross between a deity and a difficult older brother. There was affection there, buried under layers of respect and exasperation. So, Wei Cheng said, "You're the ones running things while he's on vacation." Zhang Wei and Li Chun exchanged a glance. Trying to, Zhang Wei said, "It's not going well. The Li family burned down one of our warehouses." Li Chun added, as if this were a minor inconvenience. "And the police commissioner is asking questions. And someone's been stealing from the accounts in the Eastern District." Shun Jiangwo, who had been staring at his tea, looked up. "Which accounts?" "The gambling ones." "Handle it." "We're trying to handle it, boss, but we need—" Zhang Wei stopped himself. He looked at Wei Cheng, then back at Shun Jiangwo. "We need you to come back. I'm on vacation." "Boss, with respect, your vacation has lasted 3 months. The organization is falling apart." "Then let it fall." Li Chen's cigarette slipped from his fingers. "Boss, I said I'm on vacation." Shun Jiangwo's voice was flat, but there was something underneath it. Exhaustion, maybe, or grief. "Figure out yourselves." The room fell silent. Wei Cheng looked at Shun Jiangwo's face, at the shadows under his eyes, at the way his hands gripped his teacup like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. He looked at Zhang Wei and Li Chun, who clearly loved their boss and just as clearly had no idea what to do with him. "Can I ask something?" Wei Cheng said. 3 pairs of eyes turned to him. "Why the vacation?" He looked at Shun Jiangwo. "Why here? Why now?" Shun Jiangwo was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was softer than Wei Cheng had ever heard it. "I was tired," he said, "of the violence, of the fear, of waking up every morning and wondering if today was the day someone would kill me." He set down his teacup. "I wanted to know what it felt like to be normal, just for a while." Zhang Wei's face crumbled. "Boss, I'm not abandoning you," Shun Jiangwo said, looking at his hands. "I just needed a break. A real break. Where no one wanted anything from me except. He glanced at Wei Cheng. Dumplings. Wei Cheng felt something crack open in his chest. He had spent 2 lifetimes looking for family. First in the Wei Mansion, where it didn't exist, and then in the novel, where it was only a plot device. He had never expected to find it here, in a slum apartment with a mafia boss and his 2 idiot bodyguards. I'm not going anywhere, Wei Cheng said quietly. If that's what you're worried about. Shun Jiangwo looked at him. Really looked. For a moment, the mask slipped entirely, and Wei Cheng saw the man underneath. Tired, lonely, desperate for something he couldn't name. Thank you, Shun Jiangwo said. Zhang Wei sniffled. Li Chun pretended to check his phone. Okay, Wei Cheng said, clapping his hands. New rule. When you visit, you bring food. I'm not running a charity for criminals. I'm not a criminal, Zhang Wei protested. I'm in logistics. You're a bodyguard. I'm an executive protection specialist. Wei Cheng threw a dumpling at him. Zhang Wei caught in his mouth. Impressive, Li Chun said. I practice. Chapter 6. The Attack. The attack came on a Tuesday. Wei Cheng had been expecting something. Liang Rui was not the type to accept defeat gracefully, but he had expected lawyers, not violence. He had expected paperwork, not blood. He was on the rooftop when it happened, sketching the sunset. Shun Jingwo was beside him, reading a book, a paperback thriller that he pretended not to be invested in. Below them, the city was winding down, the street vendors packing up their carts, the children being called inside for dinner. It was almost peaceful, and then Wei Cheng heard the crash. It came from below, his floor, his apartment. The sound of splintering wood, of glass breaking, of footsteps that were not careful or quiet. Shin Jiangwo was on his feet before Wei Cheng could blink. The book fell to the ground, forgotten. Stay here, he said. Shun Jiangwo. Stay. Here. He was gone before Wei Cheng could argue, his footsteps silent on the stairs. Wei Cheng stood alone on the rooftop, the sunset bleeding into the sky behind him, and listened. The fight, if it could be called that, lasted less than a minute. By the time Wei Cheng reached the 6th floor, he had not stayed on the rooftop because Wei Cheng had never been good at following orders. 3 men were tied up in the hallway with their own belts. They were bleeding from various orifices and moaning softly. Shun Jiangwo was sitting on the floor, his back against the wall, wiping blood from his knuckles. His expression was calm, almost bored, but his hands were shaking. You didn't stay, he said. You didn't really think I would. Shun Jiangwo didn't argue. Wei Cheng stepped over one of the groaning men and sat down beside him. He took Shin Jiangwo's hands, the bloody ones, and examined them. The knuckles were split, the skin raw, but nothing looked broken. Who are they, he asked. Liang Hao's men. Your stepmother's brother. He sent them to send a message. Shin Jiangwo's voice was flat. They were going to hurt you. But they didn't. No. Wei Cheng looked at the 3 men, who were now trying to crawl toward the stairs. One of them had wet himself. You didn't kill them. Shun Jiangwo was quiet for a moment. No. Why not? Because you would have been disappointed. Wei Cheng looked at him. Shun Jiangwo's face was turned away, but his ears were red, the only sign that he was embarrassed. Thank you, Wei Cheng said. I didn't do it for thanks. What did you do it for? Shun Jiangwo finally looked at him. His eyes were dark, unreadable, but there was something there, something that made Wei Cheng's heart beat faster. I don't know, Shun Jiangwo said, but I would do it again. They sat in the hallway while the police came, while the men were arrested, while Zhang Wei and Li Chun arrived in a flurry of panic and profanity. Through all of it, Shun Jiangwo didn't let go of Wei Cheng's hand. That night, Wei Cheng couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of the evening. The crash, the footsteps, the way Shun Jiangwo had looked at him afterward, like he was something precious. This is dangerous, he told himself. He's dangerous. You should keep your distance. But he couldn't, and he didn't want to. At 2 a.m., he got up and walked to the door of 602. He knocked softly. The door opened almost immediately, as if Shun Jiangwo had been waiting. I can't sleep, Wei Cheng said. Neither can I. They looked at each other. Come in, Shun Jiangwo said. Wei Cheng stepped inside. The apartment was still bare, still silent, but there were small changes now. A photo on the wall. A picture of Wei Cheng laughing, taken without his knowledge. A cactus on the windowsill, labeled Little Cheng, in Shun Jiangwo's neat handwriting. A second rice cooker next to the first, this one cheaper, clearly bought as backup. You kept my photo, Wei Cheng said. It's a good photo. It's blurry. You're smiling. Wei Cheng didn't know what to say to that. They sat on the floor, facing each other, the city lights filtering through the blackout curtains. The silence between them was different now. Not the silence of strangers, but the silence of people who had seen each other's shadows and stayed anyway. Why did you come here? Shun Jiangwo asked. To this building, to this life. Wei Cheng considered the question. He could lie. He could make something up, something simple and safe. But he was tired of lying. I've lived this life before, he said. This exact life. In a novel, I think, or something like it. I was the fake young master. I went crazy. I died alone. He looked at his hands. And then I woke up again. In the mansion, on the day Wei Yu came home. Shun Jiangwo didn't laugh. Didn't look at him like he was crazy. He just listened. So you left, he said. I left. I wanted something different. Something quiet. Something no one could take from me. Wei Cheng looked up. I didn't expect to find you. Did you know who I was? In the novel? No. Wei Cheng shook his head. I died before you appeared. You were the final villain, I think. The one who burned everything down at the end. But I never met you. Shun Jiangwo absorbed this. In the novel, he said slowly, did I die? I don't know. I wasn't there. A long pause. Do you believe in fate? Shun Jiangwo asked. No. I believe in choices. Then what choice are you making? Right now? Wei Cheng looked at him. At the sharp cheekbones, the dark eyes, the hands that had killed and protected in equal measure. At the man who had fixed his washing machine, watered his cactus, eaten his dumplings without asking for anything in return. I'm choosing to stay, he said. Shun Jiangwo reached out. His hand hovered in the air between them, close enough to touch but not touching. Can I? Yes. Shun Jiangwo's hand closed around Wei Cheng's. His palm was warm, calloused, slightly damp with nervousness. They sat in the darkness, holding hands, while the city slept around them. Chapter 7. The New Routine. 6 months later, Lucky Garden looked almost livable. Wei Cheng had painted the walls of his apartment a warm gray, the color of rain clouds, but in a comforting way. He had hung his own artwork on the walls, sketches of the city, of the rooftop, of Shun Jiangwo reading his paperback thrillers. He had bought a Real bed, real sheets, real plates that matched. Shun Jiangwo's apartment was still bare, but it was no longer empty. The cactus on the windowsill had grown 2 new spines. The photo of Wei Cheng laughing was now joined by a photo of Zhang Wei and Li Chun making ridiculous faces, taken against their will. The second rice cooker sat next to the first, ready for emergencies. And the door between their apartments was always open. Wei Cheng was making dumplings when Zhang Wei burst through the door. The Li family surrendered, he announced, waving a piece of paper like a flag. Full capitulation. They're giving us the Eastern Docks. Congratulations, Wei Cheng said, not looking up from his dough. Aren't you excited? This is huge. We've been fighting them for years. I'm excited that you're here. Sit down. You can help with the dumplings. Zhang Wei looked at the dough. He looked at his enormous hands. I don't think that's a good idea. Then sit down and watch. He sat. Li Chun arrived a few minutes later, followed by Wei Yu, who had become a regular visitor after the attack, bringing pastries and guilt in equal measure. Wei Yu had grown stronger in the past months, less tentative, more sure of himself. The novel's protagonist was becoming someone new, someone Wei Cheng was proud to call friend. Gu Yinsheng says hello, Wei Yu said, setting down a box of pastries. He also says he's not avoiding Shun Jiangwo, which means he's definitely avoiding Shun Jiangwo. He's scared of me, Shun Jiangwo said from the doorway. He was wearing a sweater, mustard yellow, a gift from Wei Cheng, and looked deeply uncomfortable in it. Everyone's scared of you, Li Chun said. That's the point. It's not the point anymore. Wei Cheng smiled. He couldn't help it. The rooftop had become their place. Not just Wei Cheng and Shun Jiangwo, but all of them. Zhang Wei and Li Chun, Wei Yu, and sometimes Gu Yansheng, even Annie Zhao, the landlord, when she wanted to smoke without her husband knowing. It was crowded and loud and chaotic, and Wei Cheng loved every moment of it. Tonight, though, it was just the two of them. Wei Cheng was sketching. Shun Jiangwo was reading. A different paperback, this one with a dog-eared cover. The city glittered below them, 1,000 lights flickering in the darkness. You never went back, Wei Cheng said. To Jiangbei, to the organization. Full time. Shun Jiangwo set down his book. Zhang Wei and Li Chun are handling it. They're better at it than I was. They're not better. They're different. Different is good. Different means I can stay here. He looked at Wei Cheng. If you want me to. Wei Cheng put down his pencil. He turned to face Shun Jiangwo fully. I've lived 2 lives, he said. In the first one, I died alone in a rental room with nothing but regret. In this one, I have a rice cooker, a shitty apartment, a mafia boss who can't make tea, and 2 idiot bodyguards who eat all my food. He smiled. It's not what I wanted. It's better. Shun Jiangwo's hand found his. Their fingers intertwined. I don't know how to be good, Shun Jiangwo said quietly. I've spent my whole life being something else. Then learn. Together. Shun Jiangwo leaned forward. His forehead rested against Wei Cheng's. Okay, he whispered. Together. The city lights flickered below them. The stars came out one by one. And Wei Cheng, for the first time in 2 lifetimes, felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Epilogue. 1 year later. The wedding was small. Not because they couldn't afford a big one. Shun Jiangwo, despite his vacation lifestyle, was still extremely wealthy, but because neither of them wanted a spectacle. They wanted dumplings and family, and the rooftop where everything had begun. Zhang Wei cried through the entire ceremony. Li Chun pretended not to, but his eyes were red. Wei Yu stood as witness, beaming, with Gu Yansheng hovering protectively behind him. Even Wei Guoming had sent a note, cold and formal, but it was something. The ceremony was simple. They exchanged rings, plain bands, silver, nothing fancy, and made promises that were not about forever because neither of them believed in forever. They promised about today and tomorrow and the day after that. They promised about dumplings and rice cookers and fixing each other's broken parts. Afterward, they ate on the rooftop, surrounded by the people they had chosen. Zhang Wei told embarrassing stories about Shun Jiangwo's early days as a gangster. Li Chun demonstrated his card tricks. Wei Yu played guitar, badly, but with enthusiasm. And Shun Jiangwo, the ghost of Jiangbei, the man who had been feared by thousands, sat in a mustard yellow sweater and held Wei Cheng's hand. Happy, he asked. Wei Cheng looked at the sky, at the stars at the city below. He looked at the people laughing around him, the family he had found, the family he had built. Yeah, he said. I think I am. Shun Jiangwo squeezed his hand. Good, he said. Me too. 3 months after the wedding, Wei Cheng came home to find a kitten in his apartment. It was small, gray, and currently sitting on his laptop keyboard, looking at him with enormous eyes. Shun Jiangwo, Wei Cheng called. Shun Jiangwo appeared in the doorway. He was holding a bag of cat food and looking guilty. It followed me home, he said. It's wearing a collar. I put the collar on. Shun Jiangwo. It looked at me, like you looked at me, with no fear. Wei Cheng looked at the kitten. The kitten looked at Wei Cheng. What are we naming it? Wei Cheng asked. Dumpling, Shun Jiangwo said immediately. Of course. Dumpling, the kitten purred. Shun Jiangwo smiled. A real smile, unguarded and warm. And Wei Cheng thought, this is it. This is the life I was supposed to have. He wouldn't trade it for anything. Not even a mansion.